Ivan Sokolovsky, who's a PhD student in Eurasian Studies, and the title of his presentation, oh, I should say that we'll have 20 minutes, and then followed, consecutively, followed by 10 minutes, followed by discussion, and then questions and answers, and then there's a coffee break 4 to 4:15 p.m. before the final session. So Ivan Sokolovsky's presentation is "There is no hunting like the hunting of man, the image of the colonial hunt in Predator comic books." Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The floor is mine, indeed. Hello, everyone. So today I am going to be covering, as was described, comic books within the Predator franchise. So the first movie, 1987, directed by John McTiernan, was one of those very specific movies that are usually described as a gear shift movies, because for the first half it's a very usual action adventure, very Reagan era, very 80s, hyper masculine. However, the second part of the movie is a classic 80s slasher, with the slasher villain being an extraterrestrial hunter, which is referred to as Predator. It has an in-universe name. The species is called Yalcha, but that's beside the point. So the thing is that this movie and subsequent movies, as well as subsequent, media in the expanded universe, such as novels, comic books, video games, crossovers and tie-ins, they very heavily were reliant on the imagery of big game hunting. And since big game hunting in its modern form originates, as per John McKenzie's brilliant book, The Empire of Nature, from colonial hunt, specifically like Anglophone British colonial hunt. That's what I'm gonna be looking into. So first, to describe the setting, so to say the hunting grounds, pun intended. So the thing is that comic books, since they are not just a textual but also a visual medium, as you can see, they always rely on, like, for example, Anglophone US audiences' familiarity with, for example, in this case, paintings and works of Frederick Remington. Frederick Remington is one of the more famous American painters who created the image of the Wild West, of the colonial frontier. And so, as John McKenzie correctly points out, colonial frontier a lot of the time was also the hunting frontier. It was a space, right, that was exotic, not only in its geographical landscape attributes, but also in terms of its zoological wildlife, as well as like its ethnic component for the colonizers. And because of that, the opening panel of the comic book, appropriately named, titled Big Game, opens with this, you can see panel on the left, saying, "Most of Cibola County in New Mexico still looks like a Frederick Remington landscape," implying that it's like an empty, wild, rough space. Right. Predator comic books, they follow a bunch of locales, not just in Americas, both central, southern, and northern, but also they go to, for example, the Soviet Union, as well as to various locations in Africa. And to talk about Africa, so here are 3 panels. On the left, you can see a panel from a brilliant comic book titled Predator vs. Tarzan at World's Core, because comic books are beautiful. And on the right-hand side, you can see 2 panels from a comic book, a one-shot titled Pride at Nhasa. Both of them have imagery of Africa. Right, in the case of the Tarzan comic book, it's just Africa, right? Because Tarzan, the borrows novels, they take place in this kind of an amalgamation of different African locales, whilst on the right-hand side, it was specifically defined as Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. And here you have a quote from Chinua Achebe when he was discussing Conrad's Heart of Darkness, that those images of Africa and the other world, they help to create this notion of otherness, right? And so it is very appropriate and interesting, rather, that this imagined scenario of a extraterrestrial big game hunter coming to hunt human beings is set in those, you know, locales that in this Orientalist, right, imagination are usually associated with, you know, adventure, wilderness, all of that stuff. So, as I've mentioned, here is another panel on the left from the same comic book, Pride at Nhasa, which specifically mentions the national park in Serengeti. And it is quite interesting that this notion, this concept of wilderness in which heroes of the comic books are submerged is actually an artificial one, because this park, just as most of the national parks in previously British-controlled territories, they were a direct consequence of big game colonial hunting. The conservationism as a direct result of British imperialism and British colonial hunting are well studied. And the thing is that, for example, local population was allowed to stay within those national parks only if they would adhere to very specific ideas of local British officials of how a proper native should look like, right? So in a lot of cases, those modern ideas about wilderness, specifically in Africa, in which those comic books take place, are constructed by colonizers themselves. So we've kind of described the locale, and I have already mentioned that there is like I would say, a trilogy, like a trinity of otherness that is associated with colonial hunting, right? The locale, the animals that are, you know, the prey of the chase, of the hunt, and the local population that was usually associated with those, you know, safari trips, etc. So here I have three panels. On the left, it's the comic book Nemesis, 1994. On the right, the upper right panel, this one, it's from Big Game, in which the main character is a young Navajo serving in the US military, and in the bottom corner you can see as well a unspecified Native American fighting on the side of the Confederacy from the comic book Hell Came A-Walking, 1998. And it is very interesting that Native Americans in Predator comic books, and it's not obviously exclusive to Predator comic books, but they usually serve and they usually employ, kind of take the role of, you know, guides, of pathfinders, and they also have this intimate connection with land, this kind of pre-existing Orientalist trope about how locals are more spiritual, not just because they know the land well, but just because they have a deeper connection with, with the spirit world, etc. That's why a lot of the time, locals in predator media, when they identify predator, and they usually do that before the protagonist, white man or like a civilized man, they refer to him as like, some form of a demon, some form of a, mythological entity. For example, here on the left, in once again, Predator comic book, Nemesis, Captain Soames here says that the local told him that he says it's some kind of demon, something he called Rakshasa, right? Another thing is that obviously the race also plays a big role in, especially earlier Predator media. On the right-hand side, this panel, this is King Willie. This is the comic book adaptation of the second movie. He here is talking about how he is perceiving the Predator once again, right? I know where he is, the other side being the spirit world. In the original movie, he was talking with a very, very thick Jamaican accent to show his otherness, even though the main character in that movie was, and the comic book adaptation as well, was a black man himself, portrayed by Danny Glover, Lieutenant Mike Harrigan. He was still kind of opposed against King Willie, because King Willie, this kind of depiction of wild, raw, black character, whilst Mike Harrigan was a more civilized one. And in that case, here is a quote from Frantz Fanon from his Black Skin, White Masks. Look at the children's picture, magazines, out of every Negro Americans, the ritual, yes, boss. And so this thing is repeated here. There is also another comic book by, it is a very unfortunate piece of fiction. You can judge by the title, it's called Race War. And there is a lot of that as well, but I just didn't want to include it because it's just like, first of all, it's politic, and second of all, it's just plain offensive. Even more than that, right? Plus, another thing that kind of ties into a larger, obviously, narrative within post-colonial studies about the ability of the subaltern to speak, right? As you can see here, once again, Nemesis and Raiden Hassan, the local elder, right, is once again a character trope that we see a lot because they obviously have like, the knowledge, and they once again notice predator or have knowledge of it beforehand, and they associate it with the spirit world. However, as you can see here, there are no speech bubbles, right? And this is also evident in other panels. This is sort of it's not a prequel to Pride and Hustle, but it's more of a tie-in comic book. This one follows a Maasai warrior on his way to kind of a ritual of initiation, by killing a lion. So there's a parallel between a subaltern and the other, the oriental other, killing to become an adult, and Predator also trying to do exactly that. However, as you can see here, as well as in this panel, it's the first page from Nemesis, as well as this one. This is a page from the Cold War, Predator going to the Soviet Union. None of the kind of local subalterns, they speak. It's just visual storytelling without the textual aspect. No speech bubbles. the text here, right, it's the narrator. It's not the character speaking, right? So this deer herder of unspecified ethnic origins. So this is, yeah, it kind of very well ties into the Spivaks, even though in the most literal sense. Can the subaltern speak? In this case, no, they cannot. So those were the two. So of the Trinity. Now we should go to the actual hunt. And the actual hunt, in this case, John Mackenzie makes a very interesting distinction. In his understanding, there is hunt, and there is the hunt. H in the hunt is capitalized. So hunting, just hunting, right? It is this kind of sustenance, primary, form of sustenance. You hunt to provide food, to provide materials, etc., etc. Whilst the hunt is this colonial big game hunting, trophy hunting, which is a ritualized form of basically asserting dominance on very many levels, right? Masculine dominance, colonial dominance, dominance of man over nature, this Darwinist idea. And here it is very interesting that the predator in this case, this extraterrestrial hunter, as you can see, it's the usual depiction of the predator, right? He's like semi-naked, all of that stuff. So he combines the two, I would say, aspects of the hunt, both the civilized modern hunt that is associated with colonial hunting, as well as this raw, primitive energy that usually associated with just like hunting, because it is usually understood as something that the lower classes or the colonial subjects would engage with. Because on the left panel from the comic book by the name of Big Hunt, once again, we see Predator as this highly technological beast, making repairs to his personal computer, whilst on the other hand, you can see a comic book, Dark River panel, where he is like surrounded by unspecified natives in the Amazon, and this ties into this kind of post-Enlightenment understanding. The gentleman in the middle is Benjamin Rush, and he deduced that there is a circular course in the progression from savagery to civility, and noted that the highest degrees of civilization border upon the savage life. Real quick side note, he deduced that because both Native Americans and French had 4 meals in the day. I'm not joking. The science of the 18th century is just brilliant.
Are you able to wrap up?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And here is another kind of example of what I was talking about. So predator is this Burroughsian understanding of manliness, because Tarzan from Burroughs' books, he combines both this inherent genetic eugenesis understanding of like superiority through blood, because he's an offspring of British nobility, and the savageness that runs through him because of his upbringing. However, he is able to suppress this savageness, and this ties him into predator. Once again, just to quickly wrap up, since we've already talked about this, you can see how comic books themselves make some sort of a commentary on the fact that it is very much a colonial hunting thing. Here on the right, here is a lithograph of elephant hunting, right? Not hunting of elephants, but like elephant hunting on elephants. And here on the left, this is a panel from Predators Volume 1, 2014, which very much resembles, right, this sort of a colonial imagery. We have a white man with a gun. We have Levi from locals supporting him, and that's why both the kind of aspect of like creating a subaltern, the imagery of subaltern, and creating this imagery of wild locales are so important. And the last just thing of note is that obviously both predators and colonial hunters, they were mainly after trophies, and it is very interesting because behind the trophy hunting also lay this understanding of Darwinian understanding of like hierarchies of mammals, and that like the human is not just an animal, right? But in this sense, there is this sort of reversal where human beings are placed in the bottom of this category, so that to enable the hunt. That's it. Thank you so very much. I will wait for the questions at the end of the panel.